Forrest, welcome here and please introduce yourself real quick.
So I'm Forrest Gray, based in LA. I'm from New York originally. I'm a composer for film and TV, although mostly TV because that's kind of what it means to be a composer nowadays. I've been working with Carter Burwell as an additional composer for 6 years now, and I started with him on the morning show for Apple TV, season one. Well, and that's like their flagship show, and really was their first foray into streaming. So that was really exciting. Seeing Apple become a streaming service kind of in a matter of months. And then I did season two, the morning show with Carter, season three, and then in between I've done Space Force on Netflix with Carter, season one. Did a couple films with him, one of which was Finest Kind, which was released by Paramount 2 years ago, 2023. So I worked on that soundtrack. And then on my own, I've done a very funny random assortment of things. I scored a an Irish production called Barber, and at the end of 2023, that did pretty well in Ireland. It was in the a number 10 box office. And stars Aidan Gillen from Game of Thrones, who plays Littlefinger, great Irish actor.
Oh,
And
wow.
then I did the title sequence for an Apple TV animated series called Pretzel and the Puppies. That was recorded live with a big band here in LA. So also a funny departure. I mean, it's the thing about a career. One of my professors used to say there's no such genre as film music. Yeah, you're just gonna get a random assortment of gigs,
Yeah.
and they'll all be different sets of challenges. But in some ways, they all kind of come down to the. No, I'm just rambling, but they come down to the same project. Because I think as a film composer, you do have to be very adaptive.
Mhm.
Um, and you're always serving a story, a picture. So
Yeah.
it's the same process.
Yeah. You said like that there is no such genre as film music, and that's so true. Have you watched Arcane?
No.
All right, it's an incredible show, and there are just so many different types of music in the
Mm.
show that you can't even like. It's incredible how they even got the collaborations. There's
They're original. It's original score.
um, it's not really orchestration or composition. It's more like there are pop music. There's different kind of genres that all like cyberpunky music, or
Mm-hmm.
it's many different genres that just get used for the show whenever they fit. So there is no such thing as film music because it can be so diverse. It can be composing with lots of brass and an
Hmm.
entire orchestra, but it can also be like it can be pop, obviously, and sometimes it's little jingles, if you can say that, if you know what I mean, that are playful and fun and not like huge orchestrations. It's so different. So I definitely agree with that. There is no
Yeah,
such thing as
it's a function, you know. It has a
yeah,
functional role.
yeah. And yeah, it always supports the story, as you said. And I think that's just incredible how you can support a story, a picture, a video with the music that you create. So it's amazing. Incredible how what a difference the music can make. And that's
Yeah,
basically your job, right? You create the
it's
music.
I think those videos, those mispairings that are really common on YouTube where you have they sync a pop tune to a famous piece of dramatic film.
Mhm.
It's a good I think it's good to invite people who otherwise have no knowledge of what film scoring is into at least the starkness of the difference. And then maybe from there you can start actually getting into a lot of the nuance of what supports a story.
Mhm.
Because those like Harry Potter is a great example. That score, those first three scores, the ones that John Williams did, I think we we separate the orchestral music and we that's what we end up, especially as aspiring film composers, we want to learn orchestration, right?
Yeah.
So we look at those scores if you've ever had access to them. But I think you forget that actually what's so good about them is that Williams is managing to be so virtuosic and it's never not in support of the story. So when you get these like great little fugal textures, or really, I mean, the third Harry Potter has so much incredible counterpoint. It is never self-indulgent. It is always in support of the story. So that's really what the amazing feat of a great orchestral score is, like the kinds that Williams writes. Because it's very common, I think, when you're younger to you want to put in something that sounds virtuosic because you want to make your mark as a composer, but
Yeah.
it's at philosophical odds with the job.
When I try to create something,
Mm,
I'm trying to maybe get a feeling, and based off of that, I'm trying to make the music. But I'm not sure if maybe I should instead rescore something, like I have already
mm,
I have a scene and make a new score for it. I struggle with really knowing when to be silent and when to
yeah.
be loud, and yeah, it's really tough for me.
Well, I think that's funny. I think that just comes with practice. Like you shouldn't be insecure about your learning the ropes because learning the silence takes so long. And in some ways, I still have an inner voice in my head that's instructing me to pull back even more because there's always a tendency to overwrite. And that's, I think what happens is that you start making yourself the point of the music when it should always be the film is the point.
Wow. All right. Yeah.
It's an easy thing to slip into,
All
especially
right.
if you study composition, because if you study composition, you here's what's so different about composition as compared to other crafts in filmmaking is that it exists as an extricable part of a film that you can put on a stage and enjoy for the masses. It's centuries old, right? There's so
Yeah.
many great luminaries. So when you get a composition degree, you study these great luminaries, right? Like Bach, Beethoven, Copland, just going through the centuries, right? Ravel. And you kind of take on this like romantic idea of the composer. And of course, writing has been around for millennia, right? Dramaturgy, of course, there's Greek plays, but there's something so different about music in that it can take on a life of its own outside of the film. So I think as a composer, you have to figure out, if you've studied composition, how to then repackage all of that into now being subservient and working within the confines of the film. What
Yeah.
happens when you're young, and I'm so guilty of this, is that when you get out of undergrad, you have this like 19th century romantic ideal of a composer, where
Mhm.
you're like, they're lucky to have me and my voice because I'm a composer. And then eventually you find yourself, as Hans Zimmer would say, he feels like he's a filmmaker. I think that's a better ethos.
Right. It's all about perspective. Did you
No, please.
study composition?
Mm. So at Berkeley, College of Music, where I did my undergrad, I was a composition dual major with film scoring. And then I dropped that because it was not one, it was very avant-garde, the focus. So I felt like I was taking up too much of my time
Mhm.
writing concert work and not enough time learning the craft of film composing. And I mean that on a functional level. So what I did was I ended up studying private composition for my last 2 years at Berkeley with a great teacher who I had for another class. And it's funny, like the film scoring degree at Berkeley is not really a composition degree, but your prereqs are it's a little tech heavy because again, you got 4 years to learn the craft. You got 2 years where you're really taking film scoring classes. By the time you get to your film scoring classes, they need to teach you about using a DAW, right? Like how do you hit sync points in a film, all the nomenclature. So when you're an undergrad student in a film scoring program, at least the one like Berkeley, it's kind of incumbent on you to learn composition.
Mhm.
So I had private instruction. I had a lot of different classes that were really helpful with compositional rudiments. But also, here's the thing, man. Like, I got access to so many great scores, full orchestral scores that I studied all the time and just poured over. And they were all John Williams scores because, again, it's the easiest way. His stuff is, it's very digestible on paper.
Mhm.
If you
Oh,
just know a little, if you just know a little about composition, I mean, a lot of it's going to be really unintelligible, but it's a great way to break in because it's like perfect film scoring orchestration. I
yeah.
don't want to say paint by numbers, but because I think that's a pejorative to paint by numbers, but kind of is orchestration. You know, the trombones tend to do what trombones do, French horns tend to do what the French horns do. Violin writing's very idiosyncratic. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like that's the thing about studying. It's you learn it from playing music. I think you learn it from looking at scores. You learn it from instruction. You learn it from music theory. You learn it from singing too. I
Oh,
think si I think singing in a choir is a great compositional instruction.
right. So that's why you joined the choir.
Yes, yeah. I joined a Catholic choir in LA.
I would imagine that like in LA where movies and music just meet basically, that you would have professional singers or choirs that just sing for the fun of it. No.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, in my choir, there's a guy in my section, in the bass section, who just did something with John Williams like a few months ago
Oh, that's
under his baton.
amazing.
So you, again, because you're in LA, you're getting all this kind of bleed over
Mm.
of people who work in who do session work.
Yeah. Do you more do composing or do you more do like orchestration
I think
when
it's all the
you're
same. Yeah, I mean, I really do think it's the same thing. I never feel like I'm wearing a different hat, if that makes sense. Um, like here, for example, the stuff I do with on the morning show with Carter, that stuff is all it's all synth. It's all a lot of experimental sounds, some sounds I've made on my own, but it's the same
oh,
principles. You know, you've got Jerry Goldsmith was asked, he was giving doing an interview, a live interview on stage, and one of the questions from the audience was, how do you compose? Right? Which is a nice rudimentary question, which I think probably rarely gets asked of these great composers. And he says, I write something on the bottom, I write something on the top, and then I put something in the middle. And
yeah,
it's the same. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're working with. It's the same kind of compositional rules apply. Phrasing, counterpoint, it doesn't matter what instrument you're using. It's the
yeah.
same exact process.
I've heard in my last few interviews, I heard counterpoint, and I didn't even know what that is. But
Mm.
would what would you say, like, if you know, what would be the best way to study counterpoint without attending a university? Because I am going to a university, but it's for finance and not
Finance.
for music. So, how would be the best way to study counterpoint or all this music theory? Do you know somewhere where it's really quality lessons, or is it something that you have to pay for, or what do you think?
Um, this is a good question, man. First, do you play piano?
Not yet. I don't have a keyboard yet.
This
That's
is you're
actually
doing a crowdfunding for a keyboard, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, but on Sunday I'm meeting a friend and he has a keyboard. It's not 88 keys, but I think it's like 62 or whatever. I don't know, but I'm getting his keyboard. He's so kind to give it to me. And then I'll try to learn the piano with this. And yeah, but I want to upgrade on a professional piano and really get into this, because right now for me it's like playing the piano is amazing. I think it's incredible. And if
Mm.
you know how the keys work, how they relate to each other, what sounds they make, it's much easier to write music because you have it in your head, you know which keys to press, and then if you transpose it into your DAW directly and just record what you're playing, that makes writing music 10 times easier. So
It does, man. And again, look, I'm not a pianist by training. I've been playing it since college, so 12 years I've been playing piano.
yeah,
Um, it is the greatest gift in life, later in life to learn piano because it's this endless access to so much great music. And
yeah.
my wife and I have a baby grand now in our place. I play it every day. And what I was going to say about counterpoint is that you just play the well-tempered clavier by, any Bach,
Mhm.
any Bach. He has the three-part Sinfonietta, the inventions. I think what you can learn counterpoint on paper for sure, but you should play it. And I think if you play it again, it just becomes kind of intuitive after a while.
Yeah, yeah. I love when
Because
that
tech,
happens.
because I think here's the thing about counterpoint that so technically this is such a lame, pretentious definition, but counterpoint is anything that's more than one note. So if you're playing chords, you are playing counterpoint. It's not very interesting counterpoint because you're playing everything, in it's monophonic, right? It's monorhythmic if you're just playing chords.
Yeah,
But when you think of counterpoint, the most basic example is a round, right? Row, row, row your boat. You have
yeah,
one part of the crowd sings the first verse, and then you have the second, and then they complement each other, and they're complementary, diverging, converging voices, and it just creates an interesting texture. It creates polyphony, and you hear that in all great music.
yeah. But
And you can
back
study it.
to
You could study it online. You really could, but you have to kind of get it under your fingers first, I think.
yeah, what you said, like that you can feel it or that you can experience it, that you should experience it or feel the counterpoint, and it becomes intuitive. I love that because music is, in my opinion, also kind of like a language. I know how to speak German because I'm German, easy. I speak English, and it's just I'm not thinking about which tense to use or how the grammar works because it
Right.
becomes intuitive.
Mm.
And when you reach that level, I'm also learning Spanish, but if I know if I reach that level where it becomes intuitive, that's going to make everything 10 times easier. So that's the
So
goal to
so
get
well
there.
put, man. Yeah, so well put. And then at least then you know the steps to learn the language. If you're learning Spanish right now, I think they're probably very complimentary. That you're learning a language and you're also trying your hand at music.
How do you mean that?
Well, because the unrewarding discipline of practicing your verbs, your conjugations, um, it's the same with music. I mean, it's just like it's so it's so euphoric playing and writing music,
Yeah.
but that's only like 10% of the time. I mean, the rest of it, it really is an unforgiving, thankless slog, especially writing. Writing music is so
Yeah.
tough. I will put it off for hours, if not days, sometimes. Because it won't all feel as good as playing a great piece on piano. That gives you an immediate reward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But to learn piano, I had to hack through it for years and years and years. I had to learn how to read music on piano. Um, Again, all very thankless, but if I think the mindset of learning a new language applies really well to music, to learning a new instrument and learning composition,
Yeah.
piece by piece.
And also when you learn a new language, the best way that I think how to learn it is just to immerse yourself in it
Right.
and spend the whole day. Best is to go to Latin America or just Spain and then
Hmm.
just be with the locals, speak with them, talk with them. Everything you hear, everything you do is going to be Spanish, and then you're going to be good at Spanish. And
Yeah,
same thing with
totally.
music. immerse yourself in music, you're gonna be good at it.
Yeah, is there a music program at your university?
No, I go to a private university that's specialized for say sales and finance. Yeah,
Which part of Germany are you in?
I'm like half an hour away from Munich by train.
If you had access to a cultural hub, you'd probably go to Munich, right? If you wanted to hear music or where, well, I'm curious, like what is your process right now in your incipient stage of learning film music? How are you immersing yourself?
Right now, sadly, not so much. What I do is I doodle in my DAW and I watch things on YouTube. And I also have a course. Yeah, Arn Anderson. And he has like a music program where he teaches people how to do orchestration or
Nice.
composing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so as of right now, this is where I learn, and then I just try to do it in the DAW. So it's not very immersive, I think, because I have a lot of other stuff to do as well. I have to clean, I have to cook, obviously, go to
Of
work,
course. Yeah, life.
and then there's the rest of the time that I can free up for this is occupied by music. So, but I could be more immersed. But as of right now, this is how it's going.
Well, what are in these courses online, what are some tips or insights that have really stuck with you?
That's tough because it's not something that it's not like I've really, really understood what's being taught there.
Mm,
So
mm,
what he says is start with a motif, make a
yeah.
motif, and then build from that. But I haven't understood this tip as well as I could have, or it's not really gone to my blood and bones because for me it's like I can do anything. Obviously, that's music. You can do anything. There's no right or wrong. But I'm not happy with what I do then. And then I don't want to progress from what I've just made because I'm not happy with it.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but in general, the tip that you should start with motifs and build from that is a great tip because what he has shown is incredible. He does a motif and then he builds around it, and suddenly he has this huge score, and it's incredible.
Hmm.
But for me, it didn't turn out with the results that I have imagined yet.
But it
But
will.
I'll keep going, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it will.
yeah,
That's a great tip. Motivic writing really is
yeah.
those are the building blocks.
How do you start when you start writing or composing? How do you start with what thing? And also, do you get like the idea of what scenes or what your composition is going to be for? Or do you just have to make something and then they see if it fits the showrunners?
No, no, I very much my process is very inseparable and integrated with the film. So it's
Yeah,
all
because
in
we are
the
making
DAW.
films, we're not making music, right?
Right, exactly. And unless you get the rare pleasure, like I did a couple months ago, I did a piece for orchestra at Sony here in LA, and that was just all on paper. You know, didn't have to. It wasn't for a film. That was just for my own edification. So that's a treat, right? I didn't have to do a mock-up. I just put it all on paper. Um, I think if you're writing a piece, you want a motif usually. I think that's a great sell to use if you just want to. It's because we're always writing in two, like a cue is about 2 minutes, right? That's a long cue. It's like 2, 3 minutes is on the long side. Most of them are 50 seconds to like a minute 20. That's my experience with TV. Um, so if you're writing a minute piece, you have to argue, you have to argue the case as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that's why I think the motivic stuff is really helpful. So if you have a 1 minute scene and it's dialogue intensive, if you have a motif that's just three notes, you can do so much with it and make it feel like you've made a complete work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, you're not writing a 20-minute composition where you have so much
Yeah.
runway for 3 minutes of development.
Yeah, that's um on my first interview, I interviewed Alessandro, um and he he recommended a piece to me that he likes from Bach. And I looked it up and it was like 16 minutes. And I was like, what? I've never seen something that's so long for music.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I was like, for me, music is it's perfect from 2 minutes 30 to 8 minutes maximum. If we are speaking
Mm,
like popular music. But if we go into compositions, well, then they can be 8 minutes, 10 minutes, but 16 minutes, I didn't expect that this was such a thing in earlier times that if you compose something, it's going to be 16 minutes. But also, if you have like
the
the
Four
Four
Seasons?
Seasons, I think each piece is like 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and then you have four pieces.
Hmm.
So and if you play them as one thing, it's like it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
What is
that's
that? What does that do for you as a listener? Do you feel like you can stay focused?
if it's that long, no, no. A sweet spot
Mm,
really is if we're talking about orchestral music or composition, I think the sweet spot is from 4 minutes to 10 minutes. That's great. Like
yeah.
the I think the Nueva York chase scene in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is like 8 minutes, as far as I'm concerned, is perfect.
It's Daniel
And
Pemberton, is that?
yeah,
Yeah, okay. I don't know the score, but I know he did it.
yeah, and other scores from the movie are like 4 minutes, and yeah, I think that's really a sweet spot.
And it's a feat to write 8 minutes of film music. I mean, it's a really incredible achievement
So
to
you,
write a standalone piece of music that
yeah,
that someone like yourself would want to listen to, and then something that works dramatically. It's like take you
yeah,
weeks to figure out something like that.
yeah. So you oftentimes work, or most of the time, work with short compositions, like 2 minutes. That's what you said.
Film cues, yeah. Film cues are
Ah,
typically very short. I mean, on the rare occasion, like I've done some stuff on the morning show, in season two on the morning show, I did some 5 to 6 minute ones that were the hardest cues I've ever had to write. And they were so simple, but they were all under dialogue. So like,
oh,
yeah, I mean that's where that I had a professor who used to say, you cannot write a 5 minute piece of music if you're not able to play a 5 minute composition by memory on piano.
okay,
And that really stuck with me. I think if you want to be able to write a longer piece, you have to memorize one that's equal length.
mhm,
So that, going back to that thing of it being under your fingers, to understand how you take a seedling of an idea and develop it and bring it back down and finish it. I mean, I think finishing a piece is the hardest thing in the world. Beginning is not, you have to have an inspired idea and you
yeah.
can develop it, but finishing it is like that's your biggest statement in a way.
Mm. Like if you want to finish a big orchestral pieces, I think it's easier because in the end you can either end it with a big bang or you can go silent, then uh, go loud again and you're done. Or you can just go with a piano solo or whatever, and that would be very generic, but that's how you could finish the piece in an easy way, and it sounds good. But I think for shorter cues, it's I don't know how that would work. If you start to compose, you have an idea, you have something in mind, obviously, and what is your goal when you write? Do you want to you want to support the movie, obviously, or the image that's being played. What's your goal when you make the music, basically?
So I think there's there's a few functions that film music has. I think the most important one is if there's going to be music, you have to ask yourself why.
Hmm.
What are you supporting? Now, I think support gets misconstrued as you're buttressing the emotion that's already seen on screen. So if you have a scene that's lachrymose, right, and dramatic, two people who are tearful, my instinct is you already know that it's a tearful scene. Why would you write tearful music, right?
Yeah.
If that's plain to see, it's already on screen, that's your opportunity as a film composer to find another piece of subtext that can be brought out.
Right. Yes.
Sad string music. What did I hear some recently? And I was like, this is so saccharine because it's sad music on a sad scene.
Mm.
It was, you know what? I can talk shit about it because it was for an ad. It was an ad campaign. Um, but when I think about the music that really pulls at my heartstrings, that's scoring a sad piece, it's if there's something tragic on screen, having something, an element that is kind of dark in a way you could highlight the way in which they're crying. It's cathartic, but this scar of what they've experienced will stay with them forever. Something almost kind of sinister.
Mm.
And that's just one thing off the top of my head, but you're doing the job of saying this isn't on screen, but it's well within the subtext.
Yeah. True.
Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point? And sometimes you need it to buttress it. There's a lot of big action movies that just need like there's action on screen, there's got to be action in the score. And of course, that's like how you enhance a cinematic experience. But
Yeah.
if you really want a gentler touch on a dramatic scene or a dialogue scene, try and figure out what's not being said.
Yeah.
And that's where the
Kind
music
of
can operate.
reading between the lines of the scene and then bringing this out in the music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So, where do we go from that?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of film music to be inspired from now. It's great. It's in some ways it's like the best time because I'm always surprised by new composers and inspired, and it's really nice to have such a rich well of inspiration. Um, but at the same time, these tools are making it easier than ever
Yeah.
to kind of just lay music anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the most the most heartening, or I should say, the most spiriting thing I see lately is that there's still really innovative music being made.
Do you
What
think that it sometimes gets too repetitive, or like we already have a history of hundreds of years of music, basically, or a lot of film music also? Like, are we gonna run out of ideas?
yeah, but you think that, and then, well, do you know? Did you see Poor Things?
No, sorry.
The Yorgos Lanthimos, the Greek director, great film. Emma Stone came out last year.
Mm.
So that score by Jerskin Fendrix, the British composer, um, compositionally, like the notes themselves on paper are, I don't want to say traditional, but very, again, th- there's something, it's accessible. It's a compositional score. You know, it's got even phrases and motif and melody, but actually where the innovation is in the production and in the way the instruments are played. Like the violins, it's like there's a violin melody. It's like three violins and they sound very uneven in pitch and they're playing way up high and it's super dry and close mic. So again, immediately your ears like, well, now I know this is a score. It has conventional flourishes, but its its indelibility is actually in how it was produced,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you could transcribe that and write it for orchestra, and you've completely lost the point of the score.
Yeah, right. But
You should listen to the last cue from Poor Things.
the last
It's
key.
it's yeah, it's like it's fanfaric almost, and it has these big, beautiful diatonic chords that
Mhm,
wouldn't sound very interesting on piano. It could actually sound very cheesy if you pitched it on piano. But what he does with it is just he has such a distinctive voice, and he took such meticulous care with every single instrument and how it sounds. It sounds so bizarre
mhm.
and unique. And that's great. So like to your point, there's centuries, of course, of tradition leading up to that score. Where it's modern is the palette, the sound palettes, yes, the music production approach.
Yeah.
Um, and also it fits the picture like a glove. It really just fits the picture like a glove. It's a huge achievement. I love that score.
All right. So I'll definitely look it up after the interview.
Yeah, it's gonna really challenge your ear a little in a good way.
Yeah. Um, do you have like a composer that you would really love to work together in the future?
Such a good question.
Because you already
I
said
know
you worked with someone. Who was it? Carter.
Carter Burwell.
Okay. So you've worked with Carter for 6 years, but is there someone else that you would love to make music with? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no one comes to mind, but I would really love to be a little more versed in popular music
Mhm.
because I'd always love to see what could happen when a music producer, like joining forces with a music producer, if that makes sense. Um, Trying to get out of the box, outside the box a little. See what I think it's fun to have the idea of like a music production background and a film scoring background pairing up. Um,
Yeah. I really love that. Like, I think Metro Booming did that, and he had on his in his concert he
mm.
had a live orchestra with his I think pop or rap music. It really fits and it really creates unique new type of music, and I think it's amazing.
Well, and again, I mean, I honestly think the principles of composition are pretty universal.
Mm, yeah,
All the great pop music, all the great film scoring, and to a large extent, a lot of all the great art music for stage is same principles. Like the ear gets tired of certain phrases after a while, so you mix it up.
yeah.
All the great pop music I've heard lately is doing just that.
What kind of music do you listen to in general when you're not listening to or creating film music?
Oh my God, almost never listen to film music these days. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean, it
say,
has to be a really good score to really listen to it without anything.
yeah, there's so many great scores I have fallen in love with lately. I listen to a lot of like a lot of Cuban music from the 60s, a lot of old salsa, soul, a lot of soul, some contemporary stuff. Like I love Lil Sims, if you know who that is.
Mm.
British female rapper. Excellent. Her new stuff is really good. McGee, an American artist, if you know him from New Jersey. Um, I mean, I hate to say everything because it's just such a pedestrian response, but
But
um,
not like heavy metal or like,
no, I mean I love heavy metal too.
oh, okay, so really
I
everything.
just love no, here's the thing. I just love anything that's interesting compositionally, and
Oh yeah.
that's every genre, you know.
Hmm.
Like I
Okay,
heard
that's fair to say.
there's this song by Lil Sims, this British female rapper, called Mood Swings. And again, it's just so well produced and it's constantly leaving you guessing as to where it's going to go. And it's bold and strident and it's so fresh. I love it. So again, like it's as excited as I get about any great orchestral composition.
All right, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, and same with I mean, look, there's a lot of pop music that gets stale, but like, do you know Sabrina Carpenter's stuff?
Yeah,
Most, I guess it's the most popular music right now globally. But Please,
yeah,
Please, Please is a really good example of a really well composed song.
mhm.
It's
Yeah.
got great
If
chord
you,
choices, the production's interesting. It's got this like choir buildup that leads into a key change midway and then modulates back to the original key. I mean, that's like kind of the pop ideal. That song is like the heights of pop music to me.
yeah, it's also
I could
sounds
listen to it now. I've
amazing
listened
just
to
how
it a
you
hundred
talk about it.
times. Oh, to hear talk about it?
Yeah, just how the way you talk about it, like you can definitely feel just how much you're into it. Just to make music, to see how others make music, it's amazing.
Yeah, again, it's there are no barriers between these genres. And
Yeah.
good music is just good music. Not to be so trite, but yeah.
You said you like how the pieces are produced. Are you in that case referring to the mixing and mastering in the end, or just the general way how they all have been made, like from the chords to the instruments that were used or synths, and then the mixing, mastering, and the whole process?
Yeah, it's really more, I guess, in the latter of the choices that were made on the stage during the recording process. How the instrument is played, how it's recorded.
Mm,
And then the mix obviously offers a lot of latitude too. A lot of great, interesting, creative work happens in the mix. But the scores I'm thinking of have such an attention to detail during the recording process
mhm.
and the performance, really. Like, do you know the score for If Beale Street Could Talk by Nicholas Britell? Oof,
Um,
gotta get into that, man. It's like one of the
I
best
already
best
see
scores of the 21st century.
the list of scores that I'm going to look after this after this interview is just getting longer and longer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about do you know The Village? James Newton Howard?
Nope.
Okay,
I
we'll look that up too.
Yeah.
These are two very different scores. But again, with Beale Street Could Talk is a really great fusion of like American jazz with some, I would say even like hip hop production influence. Uh, and it's so special because it sounds like he got the best performances from these musicians. Like it's in the composition for sure, but man, is that score in the production. What's so good about some of these scores that come about through the production process, not just the composition process, um, is that each instrument isn't just an instrument on a stage that you mic. It's its own distinct voice that you have a pre-compositional consideration when you go into the recording space as to what you're trying to get out of it. What is this trumpet going to sound like? I mean, if Beale Street Could Talk is a great, it's a very brass heavy, but in like the more lyrical, it gets a very lyrical performance out of the brass. Uh, it's how the trumpet sounds that
Yeah.
makes the score so indelible.
All
If
right.
you, again, if you took that composition, you put it on paper, you're not quite getting at the heart of it. It's like a good conductor with you listen to Bernstein's Beethoven because he walked into the space with his own considerations as to what he was going to pull out of the instrument. Every score is made that way, of course, but some of these new scores really are, yes, I have a string section, but how can I record it? What is it trying to say? What is the what is the extra compositional layer? So yes, you have the notes on paper, but what if they all played with no vibrato and I
Mm,
close mic them? So it's very dry and very intimate, and you can even hear their fingers a little, like touching the body of the violin.
yeah.
That's its own quality, you know what I mean? And it sounds kind of airy and non-committal, but you get a lot of great experimental stuff from that.
Yeah, that's kind of what you also said with the other film score, where if you took the violins and just put it into sheet music, it would not be the same as how it was played in the series.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas
Uh,
whereas Bach, like a lot of great Bach, what's so amazing about it is that you can do that with Bach. You can play it on four saxophones and it'll still move you because the relationship of how the notes move against each other is kind of what's so evocative.
mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you could play Bach on a toy piano and someone would stop in their tracks and be like, "That's really nice." You know?
Yeah, I think I get what you're trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, in your own compositions, or you do a lot of additional music, right?
Yeah, mostly.
Mostly. Okay. And
Mm.
how does the work process work when you or go about when you have something to do? Um, what happens until the score is finished, like from start to finish?
So when you're doing additional music, it depends how much latitude you have to insert your own sound or voice kind of depends on who you're working with.
Uh,
Um,
what what do you mean by that? So how much you can influence the track yourself?
exactly.
Oh yeah, all right.
Because if you're additional, there's a guiding doctrine or philosophy as to what the music should sound like,
Yeah,
as you know, handed down from on high from the composer you're working for.
yeah,
Um, so I've had additional writing, like I worked on the first season of Bridgerton, where it was really kind of by the book. Like there's temp music in it, and the note I would get is like, the director likes the temp music. So I did something that was close. It was like a Max Richter piece, but I kind of just made it my own version of that. But again, it was very clear what the objective should be before writing the music. And then sometimes, like with Carter on the morning show, he used to send me like a treatise on a scene where it'd be like at 14 seconds, I would change key. And then at 33 seconds, I would add a rhythmic element. So basically, I was just taking his blueprint and filling it in. But now, after 6 years of having worked with him, now it's kind of just like, here's the scene. You know, so that's different. That's trust. I mean, if I started working with a new composer tomorrow, there would also be a lot of hand holding, I think.
yeah.
And here's my sound. I worked with Chris Leonard's on a Halloween movie he did, The Curse of Bridge Hollow. Is on Netflix 3 years ago, 2022. Yeah. And it was very, he said, "Oh, I like my woodwinds sound like this. What reverb are you using? Can you download these samples?" Uh, again, and the whole point was to sound as much like him as possible.
Yeah.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, definitely.
Mm.
And in sense of your own compositions, like for the most part, you do additional music, but for your own compositions,
Mm.
or is there a lot of work in that space, or and where is your work coming from? Is it like advertisers, or is it people who need a cue for their um, own show that they release on YouTube or whatever? Um, so how's that going?
So that's such a good question because this relates to every young composer. Um, I have been offered films. Like last year, I scored this American feature film that had a music budget. This is great, right? I recorded in Budapest with the orchestra there. I could get it professionally mixed. I received some pay for myself that I took out of the package. So typically it looks like that for a composer at my level, is that you get like a small budget indie feature with a decent sized music budget. Um, but I just did two short films, really fantastic, with a director I've been working with for 2 years now, and we recorded them in Budapest. There was enough funding to score with an orchestra. I didn't collect any money for myself. So that's the kind of dance you have to do. You do a lot of additional, like I do, You get residuals if you're lucky, right? Through um, when it gets streamed. So you get like quarterly residuals, which kind of support you when you do these short films, say, or indie features with very little money.
Yeah.
Um, I think when you're starting out, and I'm not starting out, but I'm still at this stage, is you just kind of have to say yes to a lot. Um, I'm doing a short film with two writer friends of mine who are really successful as writers. They write on this Hulu show and this Netflix show that came out this year. But they're directing this short film, and there's no money for music. But that's okay because I love working with them. And I cannot
Yeah.
wait to create something with them as collaborators. And I'm lucky that I put in, maybe like your finance job for you. I have work I've done for other composers that am still getting residuals from, and that supports me so that I can do the short film. And that's kind of, I think that's the dance now
Yeah.
for a youngish composer.
Yeah. And I think it's also kind of an ordeal to really get from I'm making music and I really like it and I want to do it
Mm,
for other people's to then actually getting paid for it. Like
right.
that's uh that's a thing that we also want getting into. But before that, could you just explain your story, how you started out